Okay, so now you kind of get the idea. We've got a change between the data in the relational side, and we're out of sync in our queue. So let's go create ourselves a new package. And let me close out this variables so we don't need it yet. And what we need from our toolbox, we need to actually process our analysis services. So we need this processing task here. Okay. Things like for the execute DDL, this is where we could do backups of SSIS databases. That would be one of your more common things you do here in SSIS. But we're going to just simply process this. All right, so here we go. Come up here. Now we need to make a connection. So let's wire it up. This little screen here is a little bit weird here. You can see if you have an analysis services project already built in this particular solution, the Visual Studio solution, you can hook up directly to that one. Or you can hit edit and you can just get your standard old dialog box here. So where is my server? It's a local host. I'll use Windows. And what database do I want to use? And that's our Learn It First database. And I say OK. And now you get to determine what it is that you need to process. So you can process an entire cube. You can process just a dimension. It's really up to you. How much do you want to process at once? So I say add. I can see, you can see down here, I can choose, I can grab a dimension, or I can grab just this sales here. I can get a particular partition. I want to do the entire cube. I have a small cube, so it's not something that I have to worry about here. I want to do the full thing here. Now, in the process options, what is it that you want to do? Well, some of these are going to be logical, some of them are going to be pretty easy to understand, and some of them are really out of the scope of what we have to worry about in this class. You'll need to do a further review of processing analysis services to really get into the index here. A process full is basically going to get everything. Okay, a process full is going to take a ton of time here. This is, I have a client that they had about a 400 gigabyte relational data warehouse in their SQL server, and it took about 8 hours to do a process full. And they would do that nightly. And they did it nightly because this was actually on 2000, and they had a couple of issues that it wasn't updating everything if they did an incremental. So they were forced into doing a process full. So here with the process full, you're talking about for a 400 gigabyte database with lots of dimensions and measures, it could take you 5 hours, it could take you 8 hours to do that. That's a long time. That's grabbing everything. Okay, you're doing a reprocess. Now, your incremental process down here, you can then go over here and configure your settings on how you want to actually process that. What tables do you want to do? How does your query work? This is almost similar to our incremental load, isn't it? That's what this is really. I'm just getting the changes since that are not found in our particular load. Okay, so the process incremental is designed to only process the changes that haven't been previously processed. You can unprocess a cube. Watch what happens if I unprocess it. I won't change any settings, but I'll say OK. I'll hit F5. It logs into analysis services, and it dumps all of our data out. So our analysis services cube browser, now we refresh it, we get an error message because the cube has no data. If we were to, let's close out of this and go back to analysis services, go over here to our cube and try to browse this now, okay, you get an error message. There's no data in the cube. That's what your unprocessed is. Let's go back to integration services, come back to our processing here. At this point, now I have to process a full. I've unprocessed it. I have to start over. So I process full. Don't worry about the changing of the settings just yet. Let's just go for a go. This is what will take you 6-8 hours if you're dealing with a real live data warehouse. Come back to my cube. Now I'm back to where I was. I can browse the cube. However, just grab them all. Get our class. Look what's happened now. Our H's went from 10,911 to, what is that, 10,921,911. Hey, you see, we completely reprocessed our data. And so now it looked and it saw that there are 10,911 rows that each have a quantity of 1,001. And let's see, I should have just put that there. What is 10,911 times 1,001? Well, there's our number. That's why we got that number right there. So you can see the effects of processing the cube. We processed the cube and it picked up the things that are different in that database here. We did a full process, but that's kind of the idea. Okay. Now let's undo our database change. So let's go back over here and run this now, and so select quantity minus 1,000. So we're just going back to what it was originally. So you can see now all of the order quantities are back to 1. Where are they? Right there, instead of 1,001. Has our cube automatically updated itself? We hit refresh. No, it hasn't been processed. So now we come back over here. Do we want to do a full process? Do you want to do a default? What is it that you want to do? Now, the process full, let me just make sure you understand a couple of these. You don't have to know, most people don't have to know each one of these cold. The process full, whatever the type is that you're working on right here, so whatever it is, whatever the object is, a process full will delete all data for that object and then completely repopulate it from whatever the data source is for the queue. That's where you spend the 8 hours. That's where it takes a ton of time to load that back up. Now today, you don't need to be doing full process, except maybe if the structure is changed, you've added something new, you've changed a hierarchy. You don't have to be doing that very often. Generally speaking, you just want to process the changes that have been made. Okay, so the types of changes, let's talk about those. Types of changes that have been made could be new facts. They could be new dimensions. Or they could be updates to facts, updates to the dimensions. So the other types of processing options, as I mentioned at the outset, I'm not here to cover every single one of them. The other types over here, one of them that you're going to probably be using is the process data. And what process data will do is go out and process the changes to the data. Okay, so it's not creating new aggregations, it's not creating new indexes, indices, whatever the proper word is, but it is processing the changes to the data. So I'm going to choose process data. Come over here, hit F5. Won't take very long. Come back and remember that last time we were processed, we had 10 million, but the real data reflects about 10,000 some odd number. So if the process data was successful, then this comes back to our actual reflection of what the data is, and that's what we get. Now there are other settings that we have here. There are a lot of other settings that you can set down here. If you're working in Enterprise Edition, you can do parallel processing. Parallel processing is going to really be more advantageous when you have lots of objects to process. So notice that I processed the entire cube. I could have come up here and said, I want to process that dimension, and I want to process the internet sales, and you can see I have these here. So sequential processing says I process this one, and then we process this one, and then let's process this one. Whereas the parallel processing says I want to choose how many I want to work in parallel. But as soon as I do that, then at the bottom it says that's not supported in the standard edition, which I guess I'm on. I don't know if I'm on. I don't know which version that I'm on here, but I guess that's why it's telling me that. But so there are some other settings that it's kind of up to you to play around with. I will give you a little bit more information or where to find more information. It's kind of buried in here. If you go into your processing task and go to the processing settings, if you'll click the help, you're only 2 clicks away from actually getting some help. So on this page is under processing options, the processing analysis services objects. Okay, well that kind of gives you an idea of what types of objects can you process, what does processing actually mean. And that's okay. This kind of gives you a couple of things. What you want though is under this reprocessing objects, you want to go to processing options and settings right here. And this will tell you what's the difference between a full process, an incremental. So you see process default, process full, and you can actually see the differences, see which ones operate on which objects, what the options are for each object. So again, I'm going to come back through this to make sure you see that. I go in here, go to my processing settings, go to help. I go then to in the process options, processing objects. I minimize all these guys until I get to reprocessing the objects, because in reprocessing the objects is the processing options and settings link, and that's where I go, because that gives me the description of what each one of them does. Tells me what's the difference between parallel, sequential, what's a write back, how does all of this work. So this being an integration services course, not really going to teach you all the ins and outs of analysis services. I need the separate analysis services course. But I think this does give you enough information so that you can take that and get the basics done at least.